How a college dropout created iPhones and MacBooks. Steve Jobs' background. On February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California, Steve Jobs was born. Because they were too young and unprepared to be parents at the time, Steve's birth parents were forced to give him up. Paul and Clara Jobs decided to adopt Steve in 1961. The family relocated to California's Mountain View. Electronics, including computers, radios, televisions, stereos, and other devices, were starting to proliferate in this region to the south of Palo Alto. Steve Jobs preferred to complete tasks on his own when he was younger. Although he was a competitive swimmer, he had no interest in team sports or other group activities. He knew he wanted to work with computers when he saw his first one when he was 12 years old. Hewlett Packard, an electronics giant, was where his father held employment. Paul and Clara Jobs promised their son Steve that they would pay for his college education. Steve considered foregoing college altogether. When Reed's acceptance letter arrived, Steve's father tried to dissuade him from going when he called to let him know. He dropped out of college. They therefore gave in as usual. The free-spirited, hippie culture that Reed was known for clashed somewhat uncomfortably with its demanding academic standards. To study physics and philosophy, Stephen enrolled at Reed. While attending Reed, Chris and Brennan continued to be active in the workforce. Steve, however, quickly made the decision to leave Reed College. The bike shop owner, Paul Terrell, said he would order 50 of the machines and pay $500 each for delivery jobs after Steve presented the Apple I to him. Terrell then took the purchase order from the bike shop to Creamer Electronics, a national electronic parts distributor, and ordered the components he needed to assemble the Apple I computer and would pay him once he delivered the computer. The beginning. Apple was one of the top 3 manufacturers of microcomputers by August 1981. With the IBM PC, IBM entered the personal computer market that month. Apple, however, had several advantages over IBM, which had only one microprocessor and a limited selection of software and hardware at launch. After inspecting the IBM PC and finding it unimpressive, Apple boldly purchased a full-page advertisement in the Wall Street Journal with the headline. By this time, Apple had 5 times as many dealers in the US and an established international distribution network. The education market, which had long been Apple's domain, was Next Computer's prime goal. However, they used even more expensive hardware than Apple's non-LC line of computers to do it. In the early 1900s, Apple's systems were expensive. After the 1990 hardware didn't sell, Next tried to make up for this by focusing its sales staff on selling workstations rather than just computers to higher education. Steve Jobs started out as a consultant but eventually became acting CEO. Finally, Apple CEO Tim Cook announced that the company's multimedia software and user-friendly operating systems will be integrated with its capabilities in development software and operating environments. Soon after closing the sale, Apple first declared that next-generation capabilities will be incorporated into its own operating system, macOS. Next step, however, established the framework for all subsequent Apple operating systems, including the macOS that is used today. Although the hardware and software used by Next had some technical merits, the company failed to meet most of its goals and spent a lot of money doing so. Some authors, including Steve Jobs and Randall Sturzen, the next big thing, blamed Steve and his infamously micromanaging personality for the company's failure. When cheap PCs running Windows started to dominate the market, Apple lost control of the situation. He regained control and made some bold decisions to turn the firm around. Invited the top executives from Apple to the auditorium, then walked up on stage wearing shorts and sneakers and asked everyone to say, quote, "What's wrong with this place?" The journey. Steve Jobs announced that Apple and Microsoft would form a partnership. Included in this was a 5-year commitment from Microsoft to release Office for Macintosh, as well as a $150 million investment, as well as an agreement between Apple and Microsoft to resolve a long-running legal dispute over whether the Windows operating system violated any of Apple's patents. Jobs used the money to increase advertising, and highlight the products Apple already offered while choking down new product development. As the new acting CEO, Steve Jobs' first action was to create the iMac, which gave Apple time to redesign the original iMac, which merged a CRT monitor and CPU into a sleek, translucent plastic body. The product line saw success in the marketplace, selling around 1 million units annually. Additionally, it assisted in reintroducing Apple to the media and the public while showcasing the company's renewed focus on design and aesthetics through Jobs and advice. With the release of the iMac and other new products, the company saw a large boost in sales. This was a result of their enticing designs and effective marketing. Jobs also formally eliminated the temporary modifier from his title and assumed the role of Apple's permanent CEO during the 2000 Macworld Expo. After much rumor, Apple confirmed in May 2001 that they will be opening their own retail outlets in the main U.S. computer markets, while supporting Apple's own growth and playing a crucial role in the introduction of the iPod, iPhone, iPad, and other products. The Apple Store also permanently altered the appearance of computers in electronics retail, despite difficult times for the industry. And that style has been extensively emulated, from Sony's attempt to emulate Apple stores in China to Microsoft's introduction of a chain of similar stores. Apple needed something other than the Mac, though, to expand more quickly, so it branched out and began developing and introducing new digital products. Apple was almost about to collapse, financially even. The Mac computer line was the company's primary emphasis, and because there were minimal resources available for other projects, the iPod had to be completed swiftly. Tony Fadell believed that rivals would release a comparable product before Apple did. The business entered the mobile device and music distribution markets with the successful launch of the iPod, greatly increasing Apple's income. Apple introduced the iTunes Music Shop in 2003 with 200,000 tracks available for 99 cents. Each offers a practical means for customers to purchase digital music. In its first week, it sold 1 million tracks legally, and according to music experts, before Apple released iTunes, Jobs spoke with dozens of musicians to persuade record companies to support the iTunes idea. Mark Mulligan claimed that Jobs was the one person responsible for bringing the music industry into the digital era. Prominent trumpet player Wynton Marsalis was one of the people to whom the gigs were offered. Jobs chatted non-stop for 2 hours, according to Markala. He was a man in possession. He claimed that after a while, I began to focus on him rather than the computer. He was one of the best presenters in the world, and the Apple brand has grown to rely on his enthralling keynote addresses. While expertly creating that Apple product, he discovered techniques to elicit the greatest amount of excitement from the audience. The audience was moved by the enthusiasm displayed in each presentation, which is the next essential factor. Steve Jobs' death. His ability to persuade and sell, which has been nicknamed the reality distortion field, and was particularly apparent during his keynote addresses, was praised and reviled in equal measure. Referred to as Steve Notes informally at Apple Worldwide Developer Conferences and Macworld Expos. Jobs, though, received a cancer diagnosis in October 2003. Jobs gave a sincere speech to Stanford University's graduating seniors around this time in 2005, a year after receiving his initial cancer diagnosis. The new MacBook Pro and iMac were the first Apple devices to employ an Intel Core 2 Duo CPU. 1 year earlier than anticipated, Apple switched the whole Mac product line to Intel CPUs. A significant milestone for the company was reached in January 2006, when Apple's market valuation surpassed that of Dell. 9 years earlier, the CEO of Dell had declared that if he oversaw Apple, he would, quote, close it down and return the money to the shareholders. All staff received an email from Job. When Apple's market value surpassed Dell's, it was a telling moment. Apple launched the iPhone in January 2007 and joined the smartphone market. A touch screen, a display, all the functions of an iPod, and an internet browser were all included. It was a scathing indictment of the whole smartphone industry, which had become hooked on incorporating additional buttons, functions, and styluses. The iPhone, which was announced 2 days prior to release, was a huge hit, selling 250,000 units on the first day. Jobs stated in a note to Apple staff in January 2009 that my health-related difficulties are more complicated than I first believed. This was in reference to the iPhone 3 grams. It sold 1 million copies in its first 28 days, which is amazing considering the iPhone took 74 days to reach that number. At Apple, Jobs was producing hits one after the other and showed no signs of slowing down. Their cloud-based service functioned this time, and it gave users a somewhat fantastic experience. Emails and calendar events synchronized flawlessly throughout all their devices, and photos taken on their iPhone would automatically display on their Mac and iPad. Excellent service was provided. That is more crucial to Apple's ecosystem now than it has ever been. But despite Apple's triumphs, the economy, jobs, and health just kept failing. His legacy continues. Tim Cook was chosen by Jobs to succeed him as Apple's board chairman after Jobs' departure. Jobs remained employed by Apple as chairman and CEO up to the day before his passing. On October 5th, at around 3:00 p.m., he passed unexpectedly at his Palo Alto home from complications brought on by a pancreatic tumor that caused respiratory problems. Jobs managed to establish the most valuable brand in the world and change numerous sectors despite his lowly beginnings. Because of how closely he was identified with Apple, many anticipated the company's demise when he left, arguing that they would be unable to innovate without their inspirational leader. However, many people overlooked the most important legacy he left behind: his philosophy. Even though Steve Jobs hasn't been with the firm for 10 years, his ideology still permeates Apple today and will do so for a very long time. Since Tim Cook took over the company in 2011, Apple's worth has increased enormously because to blockbuster items like the Apple Watch and AirPods.